People reveal more than they intend. As I stepped into the crowded conference hall, the buzz of greetings and the scent of fresh coffee hit me like an invitation and a challenge. I've spent years observing the subtle dance of human connection in boardrooms, cafes, and family dinners, learning that true intelligence goes beyond IQ scores or technical know-how. It's the silent art of reading the unspoken currents beneath every smile, hesitation, or shifting posture. This is social intelligence, the capacity to perceive others' emotions, intentions, and perspectives, and to respond in ways that build rapport, trust, and influence. From the very first moment you tune into a conversation, you're performing a complex mental calculation. Your brain swiftly labels the speaker's tone, matches it to facial microexpressions, and compares that data to your memories of similar interactions. You register if someone's excitement is genuine or masked by nerves. You sense if a colleague's polite nod hides frustration. Even a subtle shift in voice pitch can trigger your empathy network, signaling that the person needs reassurance rather than rebuttal. For example, imagine Eleanor Roosevelt delivering a speech in 1939. As she addressed an anxious nation on the brink of war, her steady gaze and measured tone did more than convey words. They conveyed calm resolve and unspoken solidarity. Listeners didn't just hear her message, they felt understood and galvanized. That moment highlights how social intelligence can transform information into inspiration. Social intelligence relies on two intertwined faculties: perception and response. Perception involves decoding verbal and nonverbal signals, microexpressions, gestures, tone, choice of words, and mapping them onto emotional meaning. Response requires tailoring your next move, choosing words that comfort, pose the right question, or steer the conversation toward collaboration. Mastering these faculties turns every dialogue into a dynamic interplay rather than a one-way broadcast. Psychologists trace the roots of social intelligence to evolutionary survival. Early human groups depended on cooperation, hunting together, sharing resources, defending against threats, recognizing friend from foe, anticipating group needs, and building alliances determined who thrived. Today, while our threats are less literal, the stakes remain high. Career success, healthy relationships, and personal fulfillment hinge on our ability to connect at a deeper level. Yet social intelligence isn't an innate gift reserved for a privileged few. Just like learning a language or mastering a musical instrument, it can be honed through practice. You begin by simply paying closer attention, observing how people shift when they're uncomfortable or lean in when they're engaged. You note patterns. A furrowed brow often signals confusion before a question arises. A slow nod may invite you to continue a story. Take the example of an emergency room physician faced with an elderly patient who won't speak. Instead of resorting to directives, the doctor lowers herself to eye level, offers a gentle question, and waits. The patient's guarded expression softens. In that moment, the physician's attuned presence bridges the gap between fear and trust, an embodiment of social intelligence saving lives. As you listen to my voice narrating this series, imagine yourself as that physician, that leader, that colleague who senses the unspoken plea for guidance. Throughout these next 14 sections, I will weave personal anecdotes, psychological insights, and practical exercises to sharpen your social radar. You'll learn to notice the nearly invisible signals people send, to choose responses that resonate, and to foster genuine connection in every interaction. By understanding the foundations of social intelligence, you unlock a skill set that elevates every aspect of life, from negotiating a raise to comforting a friend in crisis. You'll see how a simple adjustment in phrasing or posture can diffuse tension, spark collaboration, and leave a lasting impression long after you leave the room. Key insight: social intelligence is the dynamic ability to perceive and respond to human signals, a skill that anyone can cultivate to build trust and influence. Are you ready to explore the neural architecture behind these subtle feats? Let's move into the brain's wiring for connection. Section 2 traces the hidden circuitry beneath every interaction, revealing how our brains wire us for connection. Deep within the folds of our cortex lies the prefrontal cortex, that seat of executive function where decisions spark to life. It's here that complex social judgments flicker into being: who we trust, whom we mirror, and how we interpret subtle cues. Beneath that, nestled in the limbic system, the amygdala stands guard, ever vigilant for emotional signals. A flicker of fear in a colleague's voice or a flash of joy in a friend's smile triggers the amygdala to sound its internal alarm or release a surge of oxytocin that binds us closer together. I still remember the first time I witnessed these structures at work. Years ago, I sat in a neuroscience lecture where Dr. Marco Iacoboni shared his groundbreaking work on mirror neurons. He played a video of a macaque monkey reaching for a peanut. With it, the electrodes in the monkey's premotor cortex fired just as if it were grasping the nut itself. The revelation was electric. Our brains literally simulate others' actions and emotions as though they were our own. In that moment, the elegance of social intelligence crystallized for Minot as an abstract skill, but as a dance of neurons replicating each other's patterns. Mirror neurons reside in the inferior frontal gyrus and inferior parietal lobule, regions that light up both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform it. Imagine watching a friend sip coffee. Without thinking, your jaw muscles might twitch in anticipation of that first warm swallow. That subtle mimicry isn't a sign of weakness, it's the neuroscience of empathy, hardwired into our biology. It explains why laughter is contagious across an auditorium, and why a friend's pain can resonate physically in your own chest. Meanwhile, the anterior insula and anterior cingulate cortex form our internal compass for emotional resonance. When you see someone's brow furrow with worry, these regions map that sensation onto your own neural landscape, allowing you to feel their unease. Functional MRI studies of physicians in emergency rooms show heightened activation in these areas as they wade through crises, translating patient distress into immediate, compassionate care. Their ability to step into another's emotional world is not mystical, it's the precise orchestration of these neural networks. But social intelligence also depends on the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, balancing empathy with reason. Too much resonance without control, and you risk emotional overwhelm. Too much detachment, and you lose the human touch. This region acts as a dial, regulating how much emotional information reaches your conscious mind. A negotiator who senses the slightest tremor in an opponent's voice must decide whether to press that advantage or maintain calm rapport. The DLPFC enables that judgment, integrating signals from emotion centers with long-term goals and social norms. Consider Martin Luther King Jr. during the Montgomery bus boycott. He faced angry crowds, hostile politicians, and the weight of systemic injustice. Yet his speeches radiated both fiery passion and strategic restraint. Neuroimaging wasn't available then, but we can infer that his amygdala recognized genuine fear and anger in his audience. His mirror neuron systems absorbed their collective pain, and his prefrontal cortex guided his words toward unity rather than retribution. Those speeches didn't just communicate ideas, they rewired listeners' neural pathways toward hope and solidarity. Even today, we see these processes in action when leaders address their teams through video conferences. Notice how a calm, steady gaze into the camerano, no matter how jittery the internet connection, conveys reassurance and boosts morale. Our mirror systems respond unconsciously to facial microexpressions, while our limbic circuitry interprets tone and pace to gauge sincerity. This is why corporate trainers emphasize tone drills and micro-expression workshops. They aren't fluff, but practical exercises to refine the brain's social machinery. Yet neural wiring alone doesn't guarantee social mastery. It provides raw material sensitivity to cues, capacity for resonance, but we still must learn to harness these gifts. My own practice began with deliberately slowing my speech to notice how listeners' facial muscles relaxed or tensed. I observed how pausing for just a half second after asking a question prompted more thoughtful answers. Each adjustment felt like slight rewiring of my prefrontal responses, strengthening pathways that favored attunement over autopilot. In therapeutic settings, clinicians leverage these insights through mirroring techniques. A counselor might match the client's posture or breathing rhythm to foster trust before gently guiding the conversation forward. This nonverbal echo, rooted in mirror neuron activity, signals, "I see you, I'm with you," activating the ventromedial prefrontal cortex to register safety. From there, honest dialogue unfolds with far greater depth, even beyond clinical or leadership contexts. Everyday interactions rely on these neural dynamics. Picture yourself meeting a stranger at a dinner party. A warm smile triggers your mirror circuits. Your amygdala detects any hint of discomfort. Your prefrontal cortex decides whether to match that warmth or maintain social distance. Each nod, each eyebrow raise, sends pulses of information between two brains, a silent choreography that shapes rapport in seconds. Of course, cultural factors can modulate these neural responses. In some societies, direct eye contact might overload the amygdala with perceived threat, while in others it signals respect and engagement. The brain's wiring remains constant, but the social script overlays it with learned meanings. True social intelligence recognizes both universal neural patterns and the subtle cultural codes that guide them. As you deepen your understanding of the brain's architecture for social connection, you gain more than academic insight, you gain practical leverage. You realize that when you feel a surge of empathy or a flash of irritation, these are not mystical occurrences but neurochemical events you can observe and influence. You can train your attentional networks to focus on external cues rather than internal chatter. You can practice breath control to down-regulate the amygdala and create space for deliberate, thoughtful responses. Key insight: social intelligence emerges from the interplay of neural systems mirror neurons, emotion centers, and executive regions that simulate, resonate, and regulate interpersonal signals. By recognizing and refining these circuits, you transform unconscious reactions into conscious connection. Next, we'll explore how these neural gifts translate into distinct forms of empathy, emotional, and cognitive, and why knowing the difference can revolutionize your relationships. Her tears told me more than her words ever could. I recall sitting across from a distraught client late one evening, her voice quivering as she recounted a recent betrayal. My heart tightened, her raw pain washed over me like frigid water. In that moment, I experienced emotional empathy. I felt the sting of her sorrow as though it were my own. Yet later, when I helped her map out a plan to rebuild trust in her relationships, I shifted into cognitive empathy, understanding her perspective without being overwhelmed by my own emotions. This delicate dance between feeling and understanding defines the two faces of empathy. Emotional empathy is the visceral resonance with another's experience. It's the instant ache we feel when we witness grief, or the spontaneous surge of joy that accompanies another's triumph. Neurologically, it relies on the same mirror neuron circuits that simulate observed emotions and actions, compelling us to inhabit the emotional space of others. You've likely felt this when a friend's laughter made you smile before you even realized why, or when hearing about distant suffering left you with a pang of sorrow. It's an unconscious, automatic process that connects us at a fundamental human level. Contrast that with cognitive empathy, the intellectual act of stepping into another's shoes without necessarily absorbing their emotional current. It's the capacity to infer someone's mental state, beliefs, motivations, intentions through careful observation and perspective-taking. Cognitive empathy recruits prefrontal networks responsible for theory of mind and executive control, enabling us to simulate another's viewpoint while maintaining emotional boundaries. This form of empathy equips negotiators to anticipate an opponent's reservations, teachers to tailor explanations to diverse learning styles, and writers to craft authentic characters whose inner worlds resonate with readers. Consider Nelson Mandela during his negotiations to end apartheid in South Africa. Mandela's genius lay not in overwhelming Pennihist's lead negotiator with shared indignation, but in discerning President F.W. de Klerk's fears and ambitions. He could feel the collective pain of his people, emotional empathy, yet rise above that anguish to craft agreements that de Klerk could accept, cognitive empathy. His letters to de Klerk acknowledged the white government's concerns, framing reconciliation not as capitulation but as mutual survival. This cognitive empathy, infused with sufficient emotional resonance to convey sincerity, sparked a historic transformation. Mastering these two forms of empathy demands self-awareness. When emotional empathy dominates unchecked, we risk emotional burnout or compassion, fatigue-absorbing pain until our own well-being frays. Healthcare workers witnessing relentless suffering often report this overwhelming empathy, leading to exhaustion and reduced effectiveness. Conversely, relying solely on cognitive empathy, analyzing another's emotions from a distance, can feel cold or manipulative, eroding trust and authenticity. The art lies in calibrating the balance, knowing when to feel and when to observe. My own journey toward this equilibrium began in group therapy workshops. In one exercise, participants shared personal struggles while others practiced labeling emotions without attempting to solve problems. Initially, I dove headfirst into emotional empathy, tears welling as I mirrored each story. Yet I noticed I became less helpful. I could comfort but not guide. Over successive sessions, I learned to step back, naming emotions. It sounds like you felt abandoned, before engaging my rational mind to ask questions that clarified needs and resources. This shift cultivated a sustainable, empathy-honest feeling without self-sacrifice. To develop emotional empathy, start by cultivating present-moment awareness. When someone speaks of joy or pain, pause your internal narrative. Let go of your to-do list or past judgments. Aim to sense the feeling in your own body, a tightening chest, a lightness in your throat. Acknowledge it with a silent phrase like, "I feel this." This simple practice strengthens your mirror circuits and deepens connection. It's why crisis counselors are trained to observe and name bodily cues, both theirs and their clients, as a gateway to authentic support. To hone cognitive empathy, engage in perspective exercises. Actors use technique to inhabit a character's background, motivations, and desires. Similarly, you can mentally reconstruct another's context. When a colleague resists a proposal, imagine their priorities, perhaps budget constraints or fears of failure. Ask yourself, what would I think if I held their experiences? Journaling from the other person's perspective or role-playing difficult conversations can sharpen this skill. Over time, your prefrontal cortex becomes adept at constructing accurate mental models, enabling strategic, empathetic responses. Real-world applications abound. In education, teachers who blend emotional empathy-sensing student frustration with cognitive empathy understanding. Diverse learning needs create inclusive classrooms where every learner thrives. In leadership, managers who feel team burnout and then analyze systemic causes can design meaningful solutions rather than temporary fixes. In customer service, support agents who mirror a caller's frustration and then guide them with clear explanations, diffuse tensions, and build brand loyalty. During the 2008 financial crisis, some executives responded emotionally panic, blame, fear, while others employed cognitive empathy to understand stakeholders' anxieties. Those who succeeded communicated transparently, acknowledging employee fears, emotional tie-in, and then outlining concrete recovery plans, cognitive analysis. Their balanced empathy restored confidence faster, curbed hasty departures, and fostered organizational resilience. Cultural nuances can influence how each empathy mode manifests. In high-context societies, emotional empathy may dominate communication, with unspoken cues conveying intent. In low-context cultures, explicit verbal reasoning cognitive empathy often guides understanding. Recognizing these norms is itself an exercise in cognitive empathy, adapting your approach to diverse audiences while staying emotionally genuine. Ultimately, refining empathy is a lifelong practice. Begin by tuning into small moments, the subtle slump of a friend's shoulders, the fleeting sparkle in a stranger's eye. Practice naming emotions, both yours and theirs, without judgment. Then, deliberately adopt another's viewpoint, asking, "How did this feel? What mattered most?" Over time, you'll navigate interactions with both heartfelt attunement and strategic insight, fostering bonds that endure. Key insight: emotional empathy connects us through shared feeling, while cognitive empathy guides strategic understanding. Balancing both creates authentic, effective relationships. Next, we'll uncover the silent language of body and how nonverbal cues speak volumes when words fall short. I felt the charged energy before the words even arrived. Across the table, Javier's clenched jaw and shallow breaths spoke of frustration more loudly than any complaint. His eyes darted away whenever I tried to hold his gaze, and his foot tapped an uneven rhythm beneath the tabletop. In that moment, every silent signal converged into a clear message. He felt unheard and defensive. Without a single raised voice, I knew I needed to adjust my approach tone down, my own posture, soften my voice, and invite him to share his thoughts in his own time. This is the power of nonverbal communication. the silent language that often reveals more truth than words can convey. Nonverbal cues encompass a vast spectrum of signals, facial microexpressions, eye contact, body posture, gestures, proxemics, and even breathing patterns. Each signal carries emotional weight and context, woven into an unspoken dialogue that runs parallel to spoken language. A study of political debates shows that viewers form impressions of a candidate's sincerity and competence, not from their rhetoric alone, but from subtle cues, lip compression, eyebrow raises, or the angle of their head. These cues can override logical arguments in our minds, guiding snap judgments about trustworthiness and authority. Consider Mahatma Gandhi addressing the Salt March protesters in 1930. His calm, steady gait down the path to the Arabian Sea embodied resolve and humility. He walked without fanfare, his eyes fixed not on the crowds but on the sea's horizon, inviting participants to focus on the cause rather than his persona. That posture, shoulders relaxed, head held, forward communicated solidarity and purpose far more powerfully than any proclamation. Followers mirrored his relaxed stride, feeling united by silent kinship before Gandhi even spoke. Facial expressions deserve special attention, for they flicker in mere fractions of a second, yet expose genuine feelings. Paul Ekman's research identified 6 universal emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust, with distinct micro-expressions. A brief tightening of the lips can reveal anger hidden behind polite words. A rapid eyebrow raise often signals surprise or skepticism. When I first learned to spot these micro-momentary changes, I realized how frequently people mask their true emotions. A client's polite nod might hide impatience, and a colleague's forced smile may conceal anxiety. Recognizing these cues grants you the ability to respond authentically, addressing the unspoken need rather than merely reacting to words. Eye contact, too, plays a nuanced role. Sustained eye contact conveys confidence and engagement, but too much can feel confrontational. In Western cultures, a brief gaze lasting 2 to 3 seconds before breaking away signifies honesty and openness. In other societies, however, prolonged eye contact may be perceived as disrespectful. I remember negotiating a joint venture with a Japanese executive who maintained minimal eye contact out of cultural respect. My initial assumption of evasiveness nearly derailed our talks until I recognized the cultural script at play. Adjusting my own gaze to a softer level allowed us to build comfort and trust. Posture and proxemics, the physical distance between individuals, form another layer of nonverbal dialogue. Leaning slightly forward signals interest, while leaning back can communicate authority or detachment. Standing too close may invade personal boundaries. Standing too far can feel cold. In one theater workshop, I observed actors rehearse a scene exploring brotherly tension. As the characters clashed, they closed the distance to within a foot, shoulders squared, creating palpable tension before a single word was exchanged. When they reconciled, they subtly widened the gap and relaxed their shoulders, non-verbally signaling increased comfort. This silent choreography intensified the emotional arc of the scene, proving that non-verbal elements can elevate or undermine dialogue. Gestures and illustration movements that accent verbal points also shape understanding. A speaker pointing deliberately can direct attention and reinforce emphasis, while open palms often signal honesty. During Winston Churchill's wartime addresses, he used sweeping arm movements to emphasize collective resolve, as though gathering listeners into a unified front. His gestures synchronized perfectly with his rhetoric, creating a cohesive sensory portrait of determination that galvanized a nation under siege. Breathing patterns and vocal tone, though often overlooked, offer vital clues. Rapid, shallow breaths can indicate stress or excitement. Slow, deep breaths suggest calmness and control. A quiver in the voice may betray nervousness despite confident wording. I once coached a startup founder preparing to pitch investors. Her pitch deck was polished, but her voice quavered at key moments. By practicing breath control, inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6, she learned to steady her vocal tone. Investors noticed not only her polished slides, but also her composed delivery, interpreting it as evidence of resilience under pressure. Even clothing and appearance factor into our nonverbal narrative. A well-chosen outfit can boost confidence and signal respect for an audience. Mismatched attire may distract or undermine credibility. Barack Obama's tailored suits and carefully chosen pocket squares became part of his nonverbal brand of visual shorthand for professionalism and style. Yet he also knew when to ditch the tie and roll up his sleeves during community cleanup events, non-verbally communicating approachability and solidarity with everyday citizens. Yet awareness of nonverbal cues alone is insufficient. True mastery demands intentional alignment, ensuring your own signals reinforce your verbal messages. I learned this lesson during a tense board meeting where I presented a new strategy. My voice was calm and optimistic, but I nervously tapped the table with my pen. Despite my encouraging words, several executives frowned, sensing my own uncertainty. Recognizing the mismatch, I paused, placed the pen aside, and relaxed my hands. Almost instantly, the room's atmosphere shifted, smiles appeared, and engagement rose. My body language matched my confidence, validating my words. To cultivate mastery of nonverbal communication, begin by heightening observation. In everyday conversations, focus 1 minute solely on body language and notice head tilts, limb positions, and breathing rhythms. Record brief notes on patterns. Perhaps your friend crosses arms when uncertain, or your partner's eyes soften when touched. Over time, these observations become instinctive cues you decode in real time. Next, practice purposeful projection. Stand before a mirror and experiment with posture. Square your shoulders, align your spine, and observe how it changes your own internal state. Try varying your facial expressions to convey empathy, curiosity, or authority, noting how each influences your perceived warmth and competence. These mirror exercises reinforce mind-body connections that underlie authentic nonverbal behavior. Finally, integrate feedback loops. Record yourself in a mock conversation or presentation. Then watch for discrepancies between your words and body signals. Ask trusted peers to note moments of mismatch. Use this feedback to fine-tune gestures, eye contact, and tone until they form a seamless package of congruent communication. Key insight: nonverbal cues, facial microexpressions, gestures, posture, eye contact, and tone form a silent language that often speaks louder than words. Mastering them deepens authenticity and influence. Next, we'll explore how emotional intelligence's core components shape our social interactions and relationships. I glanced across the seminar room at Mira. Her brows furrowed as she struggled to articulate how she felt about the project's sudden shift in scope. Her hands twisted the Pinkapan, unconscious sign of inner turmoil. At that moment, I recognized that mere awareness of body language wasn't enough. We also needed an emotional framework to interpret and manage these signals. Emotional intelligence provides that framework, composed of 5 interrelated elements: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Together, they form the compass that guides our responses in social landscapes. Self-awareness is our ability to recognize and understand our own emotions as they occur. It's the pulse check that tells us when excitement bubbles beneath our calm exterior or when frustration simmers under polite words. In high-stakes environments like the Oval Office during the Cuban Missile Crisis, President John F. Kennedy's acute self-awareness allowed him to perceive his own anxiety and resist impulsive military action. By acknowledging the tight knot in his stomach, he deliberately sought counsel and alternative strategies, preventing escalation to nuclear conflict. Without such self-awareness, leaders risk lashing out under pressure or masking anxiety in ways that erode trust. Developing self-awareness starts with pausing to label feelings. During a team meeting, before responding to criticism, take a mental beat and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Name it: I feel defensive, I feel curious, or I feel disappointed. This simple act of naming changes brain activity, reducing amygdala reactivity and strengthening the prefrontal cortex's regulatory control. Over time, this practice builds an emotional glossary in your mind, making internal states more transparent and manageable. The second pillar, self-regulation, builds on awareness. It's the capacity to manage impulses, channeling emotions constructively rather than reacting reflexively. Think of Nelson Mandela's time on Robben Island. despite enduring injustice and isolation. He regulated anger to maintain dignity and strategic patience. By reframing his suffering as fuel for reconciliation rather than revenge, he preserved mental clarity and moral authority, shaping South Africa's future. Techniques for self-regulation include strategic breathing. Inhale deeply for 4 counts, hold for 2, then exhale for 6 to downshift the nervous system. Cognitive reframing also helps. When faced with criticism, view it as information rather than attack. In my own career, I once received harsh feedback on a public presentation. My initial reaction was defensiveness, my heart pounding. I paused, took a breath, and reframed the critique. This is an opportunity to refine my narrative, not a judgment of my worth. That mental shift stabilized my emotions, allowing me to ask clarifying questions and emerge with an improved framework. Motivation, the third element, refers to our internal drive to pursue goals beyond external rewards. It's the passion that sustains us through setbacks and ignites creativity. Anne Frank, writing under the threat of discovery, maintained a remarkable sense of hope and purpose in her diary. Her intrinsic motivation to document her experiences and believe in human goodness fueled her resilience. In professional settings, employees with high emotional motivation often set personal standards that exceed organizational expectations, driven by mastery and growth rather than praise or pay. Cultivating motivation involves connecting tasks to deeper values. Rather than seeing a report as drudgery, view it as a stepping stone to impact, perhaps influencing a policy that improves lives. Journaling about why your work matters or setting learning goals instead of performance goals can ignite intrinsic drive. Celebrate small wins to reinforce progress and maintain momentum. Empathy, the fourth pillar. We've already explored in depth, but here it sits as a formal component of emotional intelligence. It's the glue that binds us to others' experiences, feeling with them and understanding their perspectives. High empathy leaders create environments where employees feel heard and valued, boosting morale and productivity. During the aftermath of the 2010 Chilean mining accident, President Sebastián Piñera's empathetic broadcasts addressing families by name, expressing shared prayers, fostered national solidarity and confidence that the miners would emerge safely. His authentic empathy strengthened public trust and unity at a time of peril. To enhance empathy, practice active listening. Lean in slightly, maintain soft eye contact, and mirror vocal tone. Paraphrase what you hear. It sounds like you're frustrated because to validate feelings. In my own facilitation sessions, I noticed a world-weary participant soften when I echoed her words back to her. She realized someone truly listened, and her guarded stance relaxed. Social skills, the fifth pillar, translate emotional intelligence into action. How effectively we manage relationships, influence others, and collaborate. It's the art of weaving words, tone, and body language into a persuasive tapestry. Steve Jobs epitomized this. His charismatic presentations didn't just showcase products, they created a narrative that invited audiences to join Apple's vision. His ability to tell stories, punctuate them with well-timed pauses, and align his body language with his message made his keynotes legendary. Yet behind the flair lay meticulous rehearsal of social signals. Jobs was acutely attuned to audience reactions, adjusting his timing and emphasis in real time. Improving social skills requires feedback loops. Seek honest input from colleagues. Ask, how did my message land? Role, play challenging conversations to refine tone and framing. Observe mentors or speakers you admire, dissecting their technique. Note vocal rhythm, pacing, and gestures. Then, practice these elements authentically. Don't mimic, but internalize principles that resonate with your style. Pulling these 5 elements together creates a virtuous cycle. Heightened self-awareness informs self-regulation, which sustains motivation. Empathy connects you to others, and social skills allow you to translate emotional insights into meaningful actions. Together, they form the bedrock of emotional intelligence and, by extension, social intelligence. In everyday interactions, team meetings, family dinners, chance encounters on the street, these elements operate beneath the surface. Next time a conversation veers off course, Pause to scan your inner emotional landscape. Are you reacting from impulse or responding with mindful intent? Use your emotional toolkit to steer the interaction toward understanding and collaboration. Key insight: emotional intelligence comprises self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, an integrated framework that transforms emotional awareness into effective social engagement. Moving forward, we'll delve into the mechanics of crafting communication that resonates, blending these emotional foundations into verbal mastery. I remember the afternoon Sarah and I sat across from our project sponsor, the tension palpable as she outlined shifting priorities. Her voice was polite but brisk, and I could sense the unspoken question: could we really deliver on these new demands? Rather than blurting reassurance, I leaned forward, softened my tone, and carefully chose each word to guide her through the plan. What if we phase the rollout in 3 stages, allowing time for user feedback before full launch? I asked, letting a brief pause invite her response. Her shoulders relaxed, and she nodded, appreciating both the clarity and the space to engage. That moment taught me the vital role of precise verbal expression and active listening in crafting communication that resonates. Effective verbal communication rests on 3 pillars: clarity of message, purposeful structure, and adaptive tone. First, clarity demands choosing words that convey exactly what you mean. Jargon may impress peers, but it can alienate stakeholders unfamiliar with technical shorthand. When I coached a software architect on presenting to a non-technical board, I urged her to replace API endpoints with digital gateways, and to illustrate how those gateways allow customers to access services seamlessly. The shift in vocabulary transformed puzzled frowns into nods of comprehension. Clarity is not about dumbing down. It's about translating expertise into accessible insights. Purposeful structure lends coherence. A well-structured message follows a logical flow state, the purpose, present supporting points, then conclude with a clear call to action. Consider Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. In just 272 words, he opened by acknowledging the occasion, reframed the Civil War as a test of national resolve, and closed with a rallying call: that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. His speech's triadic structure and parallel phrasing made it memorable and forceful. We can borrow that simplicity. Introduce your topic, explain its importance, then invite next steps. Adaptive tone completes the triad. Tone reflects your attitude toward both content and audience. Too formal a tone can feel stilted. Too casual may undermine authority. I once observed a university professor switch mid-lecture from academic lecture mode to conversational tone when a student shared a personal insight. Leaning in, lowering his voice, and adopting a more relaxed pace, he validated her experience. The room's energy shifted. Peers became more engaged, asking questions they'd previously reserved. By tuning tone to situation, he bridged authority with approachability. Active listening is the essential counterpart. Without true listening, even the clearest message can miss its mark. Active listening involves full attention, eye contact, minimal interruptions, and reflective feedback. During a team retrospective, I noticed one member, Luis, kept interrupting others to offer solutions. Although well-intentioned, his interruptions stifled open discussion. I invited everyone to a listening round. Each person had uninterrupted 2 minutes to speak, while others simply listened. Afterward, we reflected on how it felt to be fully heard. Luis admitted that hearing concerns without immediately jumping in allowed him to form better, more relevant suggestions. Active listening fosters trust and surfaces insights that might otherwise stay hidden. Precision in phrasing amplifies impact. Using concrete imagery rather than abstract notions helps listeners visualize ideas. Instead of saying, "We need to improve customer engagement," you might say, "Let's implement weekly check-in calls with our top 10 clients to address questions before they become issues." The latter paints a vivid picture of action, timeline, and target. Mark Twain observed that the difference between the right word and almost the right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. Choose words that generate clear mental images and incite action. Another technique is the strategic pause. Silence, when used intentionally, gives weight to your message and room for others to process. I recall presenting a difficult budget cut and watched some heads drop. Rather than rushing into rationalizations, I paused for 5 seconds long enough to feel awkward, then continued. I know this is unexpected. Let's talk through your concerns. That pause signaled respect for their reactions and created a safe space for honest dialogue. Without that silence, my words would have sounded defensive or dismissive. Mirroring language can also deepen connection. If a colleague frames a problem as draining our resources, adopting that phrasing in your response signals alignment. You're right. That resource strain is our biggest challenge. Acknowledges their perspective before you propose solutions. Mirroring fosters rapport by validating the speaker's worldview. However, use this sparingly. Overuse can feel mimicry rather than genuine alignment. Questions drive engagement and reveal unspoken needs. Open-ended questions. What's your biggest concern about this timeline? Invite reflection, while closed questions. Do you agree? Confirm alignment. During a product launch planning session, I asked, what could prevent this launch from achieving its target? The team's candid responses uncovered overlooked dependencies. By surfacing roadblocks early, we adjusted our timeline and averted potential failure. Crafting questions that probe assumptions and uncover hidden objections ensures your communication remains collaborative and adaptive. Storytelling transforms dry data into memorable narratives. In 1984, Apple's 1984 Super Bowl commercial told a dystopian story of liberation, not the technical specifications of the Macintosh. Viewers felt an emotional connection to the narrative, making Apple's brand identity resonate far beyond product features. You can apply this by sharing brief anecdotes that illustrate your point. Instead of listing metrics, describe how a customer named Maria regained confidence in her business after using your service voice breaking when she spoke of renewed sales. Stories anchor abstract concepts in relatable human experience. Tone of voice matters as much as word choice. Vary your pitch, pace, and volume to emphasize key points. A monotone delivery can lull listeners, no matter how compelling your content. When coaching executives, I record their speeches and point out where they can accelerate for excitement or slow down for emphasis. One CEO, upon seeing playback, realized his closing call to action blended into the middle of his talk. By slowing his pace and lowering his volume for those lines, he transformed the ending into a memorable climax that moved his audience to applause. Empathy in communication shows you're attuned to listeners' emotions. Phrases like, I understand this is challenging, or I appreciate your patience, acknowledge feelings and build goodwill. When launching a system upgrade that caused unexpected downtime, the IT director began his all-hands address by saying, I know this outage disrupted your work, and I apologize for the frustration it caused. That simple, empathetic opening quelled anger and invited cooperative problem-solving. Finally, feedback loops ensure your message lands as intended. After key communications project kickoffs, major announcements solicit quick pulse checks. On a scale of 1 to 5, how clear is this plan? Use anonymous polls if needed. If clarity scores dip, revisit your phrasing. Continuous feedback refines your communication over time, ensuring alignment and preventing misunderstandings. Mastering verbal expression and active listening doesn't require theatrical, flair-just intentional practice. Begin by recording brief conversations and reviewing for clarity of structure, tone variation, and listening habit. Next, script your key points in bullet form before important discussions to solidify your message flow. Finally, enlist a trusted colleague to role-play challenging dialogues, capturing both your speaking and listening skills in a safe rehearsal space. Key insight: effective communication blends clear, structured language with adaptive tone and active listening, transforming information exchange into genuine connection and collaborative action. Next, we'll dive into empathy's transformative power, examining how genuine understanding elevates relationships beyond mere exchanges. I still remember the afternoon I visited an underfunded community center in Detroit. The children shuffled in hesitantly, their eyes wary of another adult visitor promising fun activities. As I greeted them, I made a conscious effort to kneel to their level, mirror the gentle tone in their voices. and ask simple questions about their favorite games. Almost imperceptibly, their shoulders relaxed, and a shy smile emerged. That shift born from genuine empathic engagement illustrates empathy's transformative power. When we truly acknowledge another's experience, barriers dissolve and trust blossoms. Empathy operates on two intertwined levels. The first is the cognitive act of perspective taking, imagining the world through another's lens. The second is the emotional resonance that conveys, "I feel with you." When these levels align, relationships deepen beyond transactional exchanges into shared journeys of understanding and growth. In contrast, surface-level sympathy, "I feel sorry for you," can feel hollow or patronizing, reinforcing distance rather than bridging it. Transformative empathy, by contrast, says, "I see you, I understand your struggles, and I stand beside you." Years ago, I coached a sales team struggling with client churn. Their standard pitch felt scripted, lacking authentic connection. I challenged them to replace one impersonal line. "Our software will streamline your workflow with an empathic inquiry." I imagine handling multiple systems feels overwhelming. "Can you tell me which task causes the most frustration?" Suddenly, clients paused, surprised by the genuine interest. They shared specific pain points, and the sales team tailored solutions accordingly. Empathy turned a monologue into a dialogue, dramatically reducing churn. In political history, few examples rival Franklin D. Roosevelt's fireside chats. During the Great Depression, FDR spoke into millions of radios, describing his own fears and aspirations in simple, conversational language. He acknowledged listeners' anxieties. "I am certain that when we are tested, we will come through stronger than ever before." Listeners felt heard and understood, and their collective morale soared. FDR's empathy wasn't passive. It guided his policy proposals, ensuring public sentiment shaped each New Deal initiative. Thus, empathy became the engine of recovery, igniting public confidence and participation. To cultivate transformative empathy, start with active curiosity. When someone speaks, resist the urge to frame your response immediately. Instead, silently ask, "What must this feel like?" Let the question guide your attention inward to bodily sensations that mirror theirs. You might notice a tightening in your chest or a flutter in your stomach. Acknowledging these cues deepens your emotional attunement. Next, validate their experience. Simple phrases, "That sounds incredibly challenging," or "I can't imagine how frustrating that must be," signal genuine recognition. Avoid rushing to solutions or comparisons. "I had it worse, trust me." Instead, hold the space for their feelings without judgment. In my facilitation sessions, participants often speak more freely when I reflect back their emotions without immediately offering advice. The validation itself can lighten emotional burdens and foster openness. Then, engage perspective taking. Consciously reconstruct the speaker's context, their history, motivations, fears, and goals. What pressures are they facing? What hopes drive them? This mental simulation requires humility. You may be wrong at first, and that's okay. Express your tentative understanding. "It seems like you're worried about losing momentum on this project. Did I get that right?" Inviting correction demonstrates respect and fine-tunes your empathic model. Empathy's transformative power also shines in conflict resolution. I once mediated a dispute between two co-authors who clashed over creative direction. Each felt the other was dismissive of their vision. I asked each to share not only their critique, but also why the story mattered to them personally. As they spoke, the other listened in silence. When it came time to respond, they restated each other's motivations before presenting their own ideas. That simple switch from defending positions to acknowledging underlying values shifted the dynamic from adversarial to collaborative. Real-world leaders harness empathy not just to comfort, but to drive innovation. Consider Satya Nadella at Microsoft. Early in his tenure, he sensed a culture weighed down by competition and bureaucracy. Rather than issuing top-down mandates, he held listening tours across global offices where employees shared frustrations and dreams. Nadella frequently echoed their words in public memos validating experiences, and then co-designed solutions with frontline teams. The result was a cultural renaissance that fueled Microsoft's resurgence in cloud services and AI. Empathy became both compass and catalyst for transformation. Empathy's reach extends to teaching and learning. In classrooms where teachers embody empathy, students feel safe to voice confusion and take intellectual risks. I observed a middle school teacher named Carla, who noticed her shy student, Alex, eagerly drawing diagrams during science lessons, but too nervous to speak up. Carla began by praising Alex's drawings and asking, "Can you show me how you visualized this?" In doing so, she validated his strengths and invited him into the discussion. Alex's confidence soared, and his classmates benefited from his unique perspective. Empathy unlocked latent potential in every participant. Empathy also strengthens public discourse. In a world polarized by social media echo chambers, genuine empathy invites us to listen to viewpoints we disagree with, not just to counter them, but to understand the fears or hopes driving them. This doesn't mean abandoning principles, but it can reveal common ground-shared desires for security, opportunity, or community. Empathy-based dialogue reduces hostility and paves the way for pragmatic solutions that reflect diverse needs. Yet empathy has limits. Over-identifying can lead to emotional exhaustion or blurred boundaries. Without cognitive distance, caregivers and leaders risk burnout or impaired judgment. To sustain empathy, pair it with self-care, regular breaks, mindfulness practices, and peer support. Cultivate cognitive empathy alongside emotional resonance to maintain clarity in decision-making. Transformative empathy also calls for action. It isn't merely feeling. It's feeling and then responding in ways that alleviate suffering or enhance well-being. That might mean organizing resources for a struggling team, designing policies that address community needs, or simply remembering a client's personal milestone. These actions affirm empathy's sincerity and perpetuate its positive cycle. Empathy's true measure lies in the lasting connections it builds. When you authentically engage with others' experiences, sensing their emotions, validating their perspective, and responding thoughtful, you create a foundation of trust that withstands challenges. Whether in boardrooms, classrooms, or community centers, empathy transforms interactions from transactional to relational, unlocking cooperation, creativity, and collective resilience. Key insight: genuine empathy combining emotional resonance and perspective, breaks down barriers, fosters trust, and drives meaningful collaboration. When paired with action, it becomes a catalyst for transformation. Next, we'll examine the art of emotional regulation, harnessing and channeling feelings to navigate social currents with grace and control. I sat in the back of the meditation hall, heart pounding, as the chanting guide instructed us to focus on the steady rise and fall of breath. Outside, the world thundered with deadlines and demands, but here in that hushed space, I confronted the turbulent currents of my own mind. A memory surfaced my voice, cracking during a keynote, when a hostile question caught me off guard. In that moment, I vowed to master not just the outward signals I read in others, but the inner storms that threatened to tip my own social equilibrium. Emotional regulation is the art of steering these inner weather systems so we respond with purpose instead of reacting with chaos. Emotional regulation operates through three intertwined processes: awareness, modulation, and expression. First comes awareness, recognizing the spark of anger, the swell of anxiety, or the flutter of excitement as they arise. Without this internal radar, emotions surge unbidden, hijacking our judgment. King George VI confronted this head-on during his 1939 radio address declaring Britain at war. Known for his stutter, he spent weeks practicing under intense pressure. Each time a wave of fear trembled in his chest, he paused, acknowledged it, and refocused on the words and the audience. His regulated calm underscored the gravity of the moment and rallied a nation facing invasion. Modulation follows awareness. It's where we apply techniques to dial intensity up or down to fit the social context. Breath control stands as the foundational skill. In my early career, I learned a simple box breathing exercise from a Navy SEAL instructor. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. During a tense negotiation with a client threatening to withdraw millions in funding, my palms sweated and my pulse raced. By discreetly engaging box breathing, I tilted my nervous system toward calm. My voice steadied, my words regained clarity, and we salvaged the partnership. Breath doesn't just fuel our bodies, it anchors our emotions. Cognitive reframing complements breathwork. It reshapes how we interpret triggers. Consider Malala Yousafzai's experience after surviving an assassination attempt. Rather than succumbing to fear, she reframed the attack as proof of her impact, reinforcing her commitment to education. Similarly, when criticism arises, framing it as feedback rather than a personal attack transforms it into an opportunity for growth. I once presented a flawed project plan that drew sharp rebuke. My initial impulse was defensiveness, but I caught myself and thought, this critique unmasks blind spots I can fix. That mental shift turned a moment of shame into a catalyst for improvement. Expression is the final step, choosing how to manifest regulated emotion. It's not about suppression, but strategic conveyance. If resentment simmers beneath your polite words, colleagues will sense the disconnect. Instead, name the emotion candidly when appropriate. I'm feeling frustrated by these shifting priorities, and I want to find a path that works for everyone. This vulnerability builds trust and prevents passive-aggressive patterns. During the 1991 Gulf War, President George H.W. Bush balanced firm resolve with empathy for soldiers' families. His measured pauses and acknowledgments of personal sacrifice humanized his leadership, fostering unity at home. Biofeedback tools can accelerate regulation mastery. In one experiment, executives wore heart rate monitors during high-stakes calls. When their heart rate crossed a threshold, a subtle vibration on their wrist prompted them to engage a calming technique, lowering their voice or slowing their speech. Within weeks, they reported greater self-control and improved outcomes. While you may not have biofeedback devices, simple self-checks, feel your pulse at your throat, or notice tension in your jaw, provide real-time emotional feedback. Mindfulness meditation also rewires our regulatory circuits. Studies of long-term meditators reveal increased activity in the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, enhancing impulse control and emotional resilience. I recall attending a week-long silent retreat where each dawn began with a 30-minute breath meditation. By day 3, I noticed that my habitual frustration at minor distractions, my phone's notification chime, a colleague's tangential question diminished. Those moments became opportunities to reconnect with purpose rather than irritations to fight. Yet regulation isn't about eliminating emotion, it's about shaping its trajectory. When euphoric energy surges, you might channel it into creative brainstorming. When grief wells up, you might pause to express compassion for yourself and others. Viktor Frankl, writing in a Nazi labor camp, described converting despair into meaning by focusing on love and future hope. His ability to regulate his internal narrative saved his sanity and inspired millions through his later work. To cultivate emotional regulation in everyday life, begin by mapping your emotional triggers. Keep a brief journal. Note situations that provoke strong reactions and rate your intensity on a scale of 1 to 10. Identify patterns. Perhaps criticism triggers defensiveness, or uncertainty sparks anxiety. With this map, you can pre-plan strategies. Breathe, reframe, or pause before responding. Next, integrate short mindfulness breaks. Set an alarm every 2 hours. When it rings, take 10 slow breaths, scanning body and mind for tension. These micro-pauses reset your emotional baseline, preventing escalations from accumulating. Over time, your regulatory muscle grows stronger, and you'll notice fewer emotional hang-ups derailing your interactions. Finally, practice expressing regulated emotions. In safe settings, a trusted friend or coach speak your genuine feelings, then observe the response. Did clarity and connection follow? Or did it create discomfort? Adjust your tone, word choice, or timing accordingly. This feedback hones your capacity to share emotions constructively rather than explosively or suppressively. Regulation also extends to digital communication. Texts and emails lack vocal tone and facial cues, raising the risk of misinterpretation. Before hitting send, read your message aloud, imagining the recipient's reaction. If your internal voice feels harsh, soften the language, or add supportive context. Such pauses in digital contexts prevent conflicts that can erupt from misunderstood intentions. Key insight: emotional regulation through awareness, modulation, and strategic expression empowers you to navigate social currents with composure and authenticity. It transforms volatile impulses into intentional responses that build trust and collaboration. Next, we'll decode how unspoken signals like mirroring and cultural context guide our understanding beyond words. I stepped into the bustling marketplace in Marrakech, drawn by the vibrant colors and rhythmic calls of vendors. As I paused before a spice stall, the merchant's outstretched hand hovered just shy of mine, palm down, fingers lightly splayed. He didn't say, "Smell this," yet his gesture invited my participation. Moments later, he subtly angled his body toward a pile of saffron threads, his eyebrows lifting in a universal sign of recommendation. Without a word, he guided me through the sensory journey: first scent, then texture, then taste. This silent choreography of mirroring and cultural nuance demonstrates how interpreting unspoken signals allows us to connect across languages and contexts. Unspoken signals encompass more than overt gestures. They include mirroring our innate tendency to reflect another's posture, tone, or expressions in cultural scripts that infuse meaning into subtle cues. Mirror responses occur in milliseconds. When I leaned forward to examine the saffron, the merchant mirrored my forward tilt by taking a small step back, calibrating space to maintain comfort. This unconscious dance aligns rapport, creating a rhythm felt rather than analyzed. In negotiations, mirroring a counterpart's pace of speech and breathing can foster immediate rapport, but doing so too overtly can trigger mistrust. Skilled communicators mirror lightly matching overall energy rather than copying exact movements. Cultural context shapes how we decode these signals. In some Middle Eastern cultures, placing the open palm down indicates offering, whereas in many Western settings, it might be interpreted as a dismissive wave. During one cross-cultural training, I observed an American executive extend a finger to beckon a Japanese colleague. The colleague's posture stiffened. A finger beckon in Japan can signify a master summoning a servant. Realizing the miscue, the executive altered to an open hand inviting motion, causing the colleague's shoulders to relax. This adjustment underscored that successful interpretation requires both keen observation and cultural literacy. High-stakes environments amplify the importance of decoding unspoken signals. In diplomatic circles, negotiators study paraverbal's tone, pitch, rate of speech, and proxemic space and orientation to infer hidden intentions. When U.S. paraverbal's tone and Soviet delegates met during the Cold War, visible tension manifested as crossed arms and tight-pursed lips. Skilled diplomats look beyond these obvious defenses to subtler signs, a fleeting eyebrow raise, or a brief nod that hinted at underlying agreement. Noticing these micro-affirmations allowed negotiators to press on critical issues at the right moment, leveraging silent consensus even amid vocal hostility. Mirroring can also serve as a diagnostic tool. In therapeutic settings, clinicians match a client's breathing rate or posture to establish safety. If a client slouches with shallow breath, the therapist may soften their own posture and breathe slowly, signaling, "I am here with you." As the client observes the mirrored calm, their physiology gradually shifts toward deeper breathing and more open posture. This nonverbal attunement precedes verbal breakthroughs, building trust through embodied empathy. In one session, a grieving mother wept silently while watching her therapist's steady, mirrored breaths. After several minutes, she whispered her first words of relief. Beyond direct mirroring, interpreting unspoken signals involves reading clusters of cues rather than single gestures. Imagine a boardroom presentation. A prospective investor smiles and nods, positive, then taps her pen repeatedly, impatience, then glances at her watch, time pressure. Taken together, these signals suggest genuine interest tempered by urgency. Responding effectively means acknowledging both perhaps by proposing a concise summary of key terms before delving into finer details. Ignoring time cues risks losing her engagement. Focusing solely on pen tapping without honoring the smile might miss her underlying interest. Cross-cultural teams often rely on learning maps of unspoken signals to navigate meetings. In a global tech firm, the HR director created a simple reference chart. Chinese colleagues. Nodding signifies listening, not agreement. Brazilian colleagues. Close physical proximity indicates enthusiasm. German colleagues. Steady eye contact conveys respect, not challenge. This chart became a living document, updated via team feedback. New hires used it to interpret interactions, avoiding misreads that once led to awkward silences or unintended offense. Over time, the chart fostered a culture of curiosity. Team members would politely ask, "I noticed your posture changed. Did I lose you?" These open inquiries, grounded in respectful curiosity, further refined the team's collective unspoken literacy. In virtual environments, unspoken signals shift yet remain vital. During video calls, subtle cues like camera angle, lighting, and framing carry meaning. A participant who appears at eye level with centered framing signals engagement. Someone who sits off-screen or with bright backlighting may inadvertently appear distant or uninterested. I once co-hosted a webinar where one panelist's dim lighting and off-center posture led viewers to comment they felt ignored. A quick on-screen note to check lighting and camera positioning transformed her. Present her face brightened into view, and viewer engagement climbed. Even in digital spaces, decoding and adjusting unspoken signals shapes outcomes. Interpreting unspoken signals also demands self-awareness of one's own nonverbal impact. In leadership workshops, I have participants deliver brief updates while filming themselves. They then watch playback, noting gestures they never intended, folded arms signaling defensiveness, erratic hand waves suggesting nervousness, or leaning back implying disengagement. Many are surprised that their conscious intent, "I want to appear confident," conflicts with their body language. These wake-up moments inspire targeted practice-slowing gestures, opening palms, maintaining neutral posture to align internal intent with external cues. Mirroring and cultural context converge in everyday life. At a family dinner, a teenager slumps in his chair and clicks through his phone. Rather than scold him, a parent might lean back slightly, cross a leg, and casually say, "That new game look exciting?" This gentle mirroring meets the teen on his level, inviting conversation without triggering defensiveness. The teen's shoulders shift. He places the phone face down and begins describing the game. The parent's silent adjustment matching body orientation and tone open the door to dialogue. Decoding unspoken signals is not about detachment or manipulation. It's about honoring others' unspoken truths and responding with integrity. It requires humility to acknowledge you might misinterpret, and curiosity to seek clarification when cues conflict. Phrases like, "I noticed you hesitated, what's on your mind?" turn interpretation into co-created understanding, ensuring our assumptions do not supplant reality. Key insight: interpreting unspoken signals through calibrated mirroring and cultural awareness reveals hidden intentions and emotions, enabling deeper connection and more effective responses. Next, we'll explore the concept of emotional currents, learning how to ride collective moods and adapt our responses to group dynamics. The conference hall pulsed with anticipation as the keynote speaker strode onto the stage. A wave of collective excitement, electric and contagious, coursed through the audience, sparking upright postures, rapid clapping, and bright smiles. In that instant, I sensed a shared energy field, an emotional current flowing from speaker to crowd and back again. Riding these currents, recognizing and aligning with the group's emotional tide can amplify influence, foster unity, or, if mishandled, spark backlash. Learning to navigate these collective moods is the hallmark of social intelligence on a grand scale. Emotional currents emerge whenever groups gather. Families at the dinner table, teams in huddle rooms, citizens at rallies. These shared vibes draw from individual emotions but coalesce into a supra-individual force that can sweep participants along. Neuroscientists describe social contagion as the phenomenon by which one person's affective state triggers similar states in others, mediated by mirror neurons and synchronized neural oscillations. When a leader taps into this current skillfully, they become the channel that shapes its direction. Misread it, and they may find themselves adrift in tides they cannot control. Consider Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. As he reached the iconic refrain, a surge of hopeful fervor radiated through the marcher's husband's gripped wives' hands. Children gazed wide-eyed, and strangers embraced. King didn't just speak words. He modulated his tone, pace, and volume to harness the crowd's yearning. He paused at pivotal moments, letting silence magnify anticipation before unleashing crescendos that lifted spirits. By attuning to the audience's emotional amplitude, he guided them from solemn remembrance of injustice into collective aspiration for freedom. That transition exemplifies riding the emotional current, acknowledging the present mood, then steering it toward a desired horizon. Riding currents requires 3 skills: detection, alignment, and modulation. Detection begins with scanning the room visual cues like posture shifts, facial expressions, and vocal feedback. In a corporate town hall, I once observed a CEO launch new cost-cutting measures. As she spoke, watchful eyes hardened, lips pressed into thin lines, and murmurs fluttered like anxious birds. Sensing unease, she paused mid-slide and shifted approach, acknowledging fears. "I know this news may feel unsettling," before outlining support programs. That brief realignment diffused tension and restored a sense of collaboration. Without detecting the early stirrings, her original plan might have ignited resistance. Alignment follows detection, mirroring the group's dominant energy before guiding it forward. In martial arts, instructors teach entering the opponent's rhythm to find the right moment for action. Similarly, a facilitator can match the room's tempo if energy is lethargic, adopt a relaxed posture and slower speech. If spirits are high, lean forward and speak with vigor. I once facilitated a brainstorming session where participants slumpingly delivered half-hearted ideas. Instead of launching into coaching, I first mirrored the low-pacing soft voice, gentle gesture signaling empathy. Then, I gradually increased my energy, posing an upbeat question and using open palms. The group followed, and by the end, whiteboards brimmed with innovative concepts. Alignment set the stage for modulation. Modulation is the deliberate shift from the existing current toward a targeted mood or action. This can be subtle a tweak in tonier dramatica narrative arc that reframes collective sentiment. During World War II, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill delivered his "We shall fight on the beaches" speech amid dire circumstances. His opening tone was grave, mirroring national anxiety. As he recounted the Dunkirk evacuation and expressed solidarity with soldiers and families, the mood remained somber but resolute. Then, with deliberate pacing and crescendoing rhetoric, he transformed fear into steely determination, concluding with triumphant defiance. Britain's morale soared, reinforcing public resilience against imminent threat. Churchill didn't dismiss the crowd's fear. He rode its arc from dread to resolve, guiding citizens to embrace tenacity. Beyond public speeches, emotional currents govern everyday group dynamics. In sports teams, captains harness, pre-game ritual chants, huddles, synchronized breath tow, unify players' nervous energy into focused readiness. A well-timed break in the huddle, where the skipper raises a fist and shouts, "All in," can shift jitters into collective confidence. Conversely, a misaligned message too casual before a critical match can allow anxiety to fester, fracturing cohesion. Effective captains learn to read locker room currents, adjusting tone and content to optimize focus. In virtual gatherings, currents manifest differently but remain potent. During a large-scale webinar, I co-hosted one panelist's drift into technical jargon caused chat messages to veer from enthusiastic to critical. Sensing the shift, I intervened by summarizing key points in plain language and injecting a brief anecdote that evoked shared experience. Participants' tone in the chat softened, with posts of agreement and applause returning. I had detected the nascent downturn, aligned with it by acknowledging complexity, then modulated toward clarity and connection. Leaders can also leverage music, lighting, and pacing to shape emotional currents. Sales kickoffs often begin with upbeat playlists playing on arrival, priming energy and camaraderie. In contrast, solemn ceremonies use dimmed lights and subdued music to cultivate reverence. These environmental currents prime participants' emotional states, which presenters then ride. In one product launch event, the marketing team dimmed the room and played a suspenseful track before unveiling a new feature. The audience's anticipatory energy peaked just as the spotlight revealed the product, maximizing impact. However, ethical considerations arise when modulating group emotions. Manipulating fear or guilt for personal gain can erode trust and trigger backlash. Authentic social intelligence uses emotional currents to foster genuine connection and shared purpose, not exploitation. Always align modulation with transparent intent and ethical values. To practice writing emotional currents, start small. In your next team meeting, pause mid-discussion to observe mood. Note body language, tone, and pacing. Reflect silently. What feeling unites this group right now? Then match that energy. For a few moments, speak at their pace or adopt their posture. Finally, introduce a subtle shift. Ask a question that reframes the topic positively or share a brief story that lifts spirits. Observe how the room responds and adjust in real time. Key insight. Emotional currents arise from collective affect and can be detected, aligned with, and modulated to guide group dynamics ethically and effectively. Next, we'll explore strategies for navigating difficult conversations, transforming potential conflict into constructive dialogue. Section 11 explores the art of navigating difficult conversations, those pivotal moments when stakes feel high, emotions run strong, and relationships hang in the balance. Imagine sitting across from your colleague Maria, whose project you must critique before tomorrow's deadline. Her shoulders slump as you begin. I have some concerns. Instantly, you sense her defensiveness rising. Difficult conversations often trigger self-protective instincts. We clinch, withdraw, or lash out. Yet with the right framing, tone, and listening strategies, you can transform potential conflict into collaborative problem-solving and preserve both productivity and trust. Framing the conversation. The way you introduce a tough topic sets the stage. A blunt "we need to talk" can feel ominous, while a vague "can we discuss something" may breed confusion. Instead, frame the purpose positively and specifically. For example, I value your work on this project, and I'd like us to fine-tune some details to ensure we hit the deadline together. This opening accomplishes three things. It acknowledges contribution, signals partnership, we, and clarifies the objective, refining details for on-time delivery. Framing signals respect and mutual benefit, reducing initial defensiveness. In historical context, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy's National Security Council used framing to guide cabinet discussions. Rather than asking, "How can we retaliate?" they reframed it as, "How can we resolve this crisis without nuclear war?" This positive frame channeled debate toward de-escalation rather than aggression, enabling clearer, more collaborative solutions. Your head-to-head talks can benefit from a similar shift, aligning both parties on shared goals before diving into disagreements. Managing tone and pacing. Tone of voice conveys attitude more powerfully than words. A calm, even tone invites dialogue. A sharp or clipped tone provokes defensiveness. Imagine delivering feedback in a rushed, high-pitched voice versus a measured, lower register with deliberate pauses. The former feels accusatory. The latter feels considerate. To practice tone control, record short sentences and play them back, noticing moments when your vocal delivery sounds stressed or impatient. Then, experiment with slower speech, intentional breath pauses, and varied pitch softening, emphasis on critical points to maintain warmth. Pacing also matters. Leading with a rapid-fire list of criticisms overwhelms the listener. Instead, space feedback with natural pauses. I appreciate your creativity on the design pause. I've noticed a few areas where we could refine the layout for consistency. Pause. What are your Peebly.R? Thoughts? These pauses signal respect for the other person's processing time and invite them into the conversation. They also prevent you from rushing to fill silence, a behavior often born from discomfort with difficult topics. Creating psychological safety. Psychological safety is the shared belief that speaking up won't lead to punishment or humiliation. It's the bedrock of open dialogue. To cultivate it, start by acknowledging vulnerability, your own and theirs. You might say, "I know this feedback may be tough to hear, and I appreciate your openness." This admission humanizes you and models honesty. It signals that it's safe to share reactions without fear of retribution. Using I statements further protects safety. Instead of, "You made mistakes in the report," say, "I noticed some data inconsistencies that concern me." By owning your perspective, you reduce the listener's impulse to defend. It reframes the issue as a shared problem rather than a personal attack. Psychedelic research laboratories have applied similar principles during debriefs. Participants use "I experienced" language to share intense experiences without blame, fostering trust and mutual understanding in sensitive settings. Your workplace conversations can mirror this clarity and care. Deep listening and reflective feedback. Active listening is essential in difficult conversations. It demonstrates respect and ensures you fully understand the other person's viewpoint before responding. Employ reflective feedback. After the other speaks, paraphrase or summarize what you heard. "So what I'm hearing is that you felt rushed by the new deadline and didn't have time to cross-check the figures. Is that right?" This reflection accomplishes two goals. It validates their experience and corrects any misinterpretation immediately. People feel heard when they recognize their own words in your summary. In Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, such as South Africa's post-apartheid hearings, deep listening practices enabled victims and perpetrators to speak candidly. Commissioners listened without interruption, then reflected back statements to confirm understanding. This process, rooted in active listening, allowed painful truths to surface and fostered communal healing. While workplace breaches rarely match that magnitude, the principle remains: listening deeply paves the way for genuine resolution. Navigating emotional escalations. Even with careful framing and tone, emotions may flare. When anger or hurt arises, pause the conversation briefly. You might say, "I sense this topic is triggering strong feelings. Let's take a 2-minute break and reconvene." This intentional pause allows both parties to regulate emotions and return with clearer minds. Alternatively, guide the dialogue to safety by shifting to a shared goal. We both want this project to succeed. Can we focus on solutions that help us move forward? Redirecting attention to mutual objectives dampens heated emotions and re-anchors the conversation. Professional mediators often use timeout tokens. Each party has 1 or 2 tokens they can invoke to pause the session when feeling overwhelmed. This mechanism empowers participants to self-regulate emotional spikes without derailing the entire dialogue. You can adopt a simpler version agree before beginning that either person may request a short pause if needed, signaling respect for emotional well-being. Leveraging empathy and curiosity. Even in critical discussions, empathy fosters connection. Ask open-ended questions. Can you help me understand your thought process behind these decisions? This invites explanation rather than defensiveness. Follow with curiosity statements. I'm genuinely interested in your perspective. These signals soften asymmetries of power and remind both parties that the goal is understanding rather than victory. In legal negotiations, skilled attorneys use genuine curiosity to uncover hidden interests. Instead of pressing positions, they ask why certain terms matter. What would a successful outcome look like for you beyond the contract details? Such inquiries reveal underlying value-steam cohesion, reputation, future collaboration that can guide creative solutions. You too can unlock common ground by coupling critique with inquisitive, empathic prompts. Designing collaborative next steps. Concluding a difficult conversation without clear action. Items risks leaving issues unresolved. Together, co-create a plan. Based on our discussion, shall we adjust the timeline, assign extra resources, or revisit the budgeting process? Offering options empowers the other person to participate in problem solving. Confirm commitments. Can we agree to check progress on Wednesday and touch base on any emerging issues? These concrete follow-ups transform dialogue into concrete steps, preventing misunderstandings from resurfacing. Effective closing also includes expressing appreciation for the dialogue itself. Thank you for discussing this candidly. I value your insights and look forward to our progress. Ending on a note of gratitude reinforces psychological safety and preserves relational goodwill. Practicing difficult conversations. Like any skill, mastering tough dialogues requires rehearsal. Role play with a trusted colleague or coach, simulating high-stakes critiques. Experiment with different frames, tones, and reflective responses, and request feedback on how you land. Record select segments and review for areas where tone or pacing slip into unwanted tension. Over time, these rehearsals build confidence and automaticity, making real-world conversations feel less daunting. Key insight: difficult conversations succeed when framed positively, delivered with measured tone and deep listening, and guided by empathy and clear next steps, transforming conflict into collaborative action. Next, we'll explore how to wield influence ethically, applying reciprocity, social proof, and other principles to guide others toward shared goals. I stood in the back of the ballroom as Maya, head of marketing, introduced our nonprofit's new community program. She opened with heartfelt thanks to donors, then paused, letting gratitude settle like warm sunlight across the room. As cameras flashed, she revealed that for every dollar contributed, our matching partner would add 2 more in offer that sparked a collective murmur of excitement. Without overt persuasion, she had tapped into reciprocity. When people feel they've received generosity, they instinctively seek to give back. From there, she wove in social proof, quoting testimonials from early participants and closed by invoking authority, citing endorsements from respected local leaders. By guiding the audience through ethically grounded principles of influence, Maya galvanized support for our mission. Influence with integrity rests on 5 foundational principles: reciprocity, social proof, authority, consistency, and scarcity. Each principle taps into deep-seated cognitive biases, steering decisions in predictable ways. Ethical influencers deploy these tools transparently, aligning persuasion with shared values rather than manipulation. In this section, we'll explore how to apply each principle thoughtfully to foster cooperation and shared purpose. Reciprocity. Humans are wired to return favors. When someone gives us a gift, offers help, or extends kindness, we feel a debt to reciprocate. This bias evolved to sustain mutual aid in communities. In practice, reciprocity can be as simple as offering useful information before asking for support. In a corporate context, a manager might share market insights with a colleague, who then feels inclined to assist on a project. Maya's matching gift announcement exemplified large-scale reciprocity. Donors received not only the knowledge that their money would be amplified, but also a sense of being valued, prompting immediate generosity in return. To use reciprocity ethically, start by providing genuine value without strings attached. Share knowledge, lend support, or express appreciation. Then, when you present your request, be it for time, money, or action, it feels less like imposition and more like a natural continuation of goodwill. Always ensure initial gestures are sincere. People detect insincerity quickly, which undermines trust. Social proof. We look to others to guide our own behavior, especially in uncertainty. When we see peers endorsing an idea, we assume it's the right choice. That's why customer reviews sway purchasing decisions more than company advertising. In community organizing, sharing stories of neighbors who have already joined an initiative motivates others to follow suit. Maya included quotes from early beneficiaries. "Joining this program changed my life," one participant said. Those testimonials signaled that community leaders and peers endorsed the cause, encouraging the broader audience to participate. Implement social proof by highlighting genuine examples of like-minded individuals taking desired actions. Use numbers. Over 300 volunteers have signed up this month, and stories that resonate with your audience's identity. But guard against false or exaggerated claims. Authenticity is crucial. Authority. We tend to follow credible experts or respected figures. Authority bias can accelerate trust, but misusing it, invoking false credentials, erodes credibility. When harnessed ethically, authority involves pointing to qualifications, endorsements, or data from reputable sources. Maya cited our partnership with the Municipal Health Department and featured a brief video endorsement from the city mayor, leveraging authority to reinforce the program's legitimacy. To apply authority authentically, anchor your message in verifiable credentials, academic degrees, years of experience, endorsements from recognized institutions, or third-party research. Offer sources for further reading to empower skeptical audiences to verify claims. Consistency. People strive for coherence between their beliefs and actions. When we commit publicly, verbally, or in writing, we feel compelled to follow through. In fundraising, asking donors to sign a pledge before requesting a gift increases follow-up contributions. Maya concluded by inviting attendees to sign a simple commitment card, asking them to pledge your support for neighborhood wellness. This public gesture activated consistency bias. Attendees who signed were more likely to follow through with donations. To leverage consistency, encourage small, low-risk commitments. Survey responses, pre-registrations, or verbal affirmations before presenting larger requests. Public commitments carry social visibility, strengthening follow-through. Again, ensure requests align with stated values to maintain integrity. Scarcity. We perceive scarce opportunities as more valuable. Limited time offers or exclusive invitations spur faster action. Maya reminded the audience that matching funds were available only for the next 2 weeks, creating urgency without pressure. The scarcity principle, when used judiciously, helps audiences prioritize action. To employ scarcity ethically, highlight genuine limitations, deadline-driven grants, finite seats at a workshop, or seasonal availability. Avoid artificial scarcity, which, if discovered, damages trust irreparably. Integrating principles. The true art of influence lies in combining these principles coherently. In Maya's launch, she began by offering heartfelt thanks, reciprocity, then shared testimonials, social proof, cited official endorsements, authority, invited public commitments, consistency, and closed with a time-limited matching gift, scarcity. Each step built momentum toward a single call to action. Support the program. When crafting your own influential messages, map each principle onto stages of your narrative. Open with a genuine gesture of value, perhaps sharing an insight or resource, then weave in peer endorsements, authoritative data, and easy commitments, concluding with a transparent call to action framed by real urgency. Ensure flow feels organic. Abrupt principle shifts can jar audiences and break trust. Example, application. Imagine you're introducing a new employee wellness initiative at your company. Begin by offering managers a free tip sheet on reducing team burnout, reciprocity. Then present case studies of other departments that saw 20% engagement increase, social proof. Next, share an endorsement from your HR director with 2 decades of organizational development experience, authority. Invite department leads to publicly sign a Wellness Champion pledge in your all-hands meeting, consistency. Finally, note that budget allocations for the program must be finalized by Friday to take advantage of extra corporate matching funds, scarcity. Each element guides colleagues seamlessly from awareness to action. Ethical considerations. Influence should empower, not manipulate. Always align your requests with legitimate needs and shared interests. Avoid exploiting psychological biases for personal gain at others' expense. Practice transparency by explaining why you're making the request and how it benefits all stakeholders. Ethical influence fosters long-term trust and collaboration, whereas manipulation can deliver short-term wins at the cost of lasting relationships. Key insight. Ethical influence blends reciprocity, social proof, authority, consistency, and scarcity into a transparent narrative that guides others toward shared goals while upholding trust and integrity. Next, we'll examine how to cultivate empathic skills through practice in perspective taking, active recognition, and self-compassion. I'd just begun my morning run through the park when I noticed a fellow jogger struggling beside me. Her pace faltered. She hunched over, gasping for breath. A simple, "Are you okay?" felt inadequate, so I slowed to match her stride. Without breaking our rhythm, I asked, "What's on your mind?" She whispered that a family health scare had left her restless and overwhelmed, her regular training helping, yet today it seemed impossible. I nodded, my chest tightening in empathy, then gently suggested, "Would it help if we tried a shorter route together? Sometimes changing the scenery eases the mind." She managed a grateful smile and nodded. That moment showed me how cultivating empathic skills, perspective taking, active recognition, and self-compassion creates genuine support and connection, even in passing encounters. Empathic skills aren't innate talents reserved for the few. They're like muscles that grow through deliberate practice. 3 foundational exercises sharpen these muscles: perspective taking, active recognition, and self-compassion. Each plays a unique role in deepening our empathic capacity and sustaining our well-being as we engage with others' emotions. Perspective taking. At its core, perspective taking is the conscious act of stepping into another person's mental world. It requires curiosity, humility, and imagination. Unlike emotional empathy, where you literally feel another's emotions, perspective taking is an intellectual exercise that builds an internal map of someone else's experiences, beliefs, and motivations. Consider a scenario in a software development team. Maria, the lead engineer, submits a design that seems overly complex to the marketing team. Instead of dismissing her work as too technical, an empathic colleague pauses to consider Maria's viewpoint. Perhaps she's trying to build future-proof architecture to avoid technical debt. By mentally reconstructing her priorities: stability, scalability, quality, the colleague can frame questions that respect those goals. I appreciate how robust this design is. Could you help me understand which features we can simplify for faster time to market? This perspective taking transforms what could have been a confrontational exchange into a collaborative dialogue, preserving Maria's expertise while aligning with marketing needs. To practice perspective taking, choose a recent conversation or conflict and write a brief summary from the other person's perspective. What pressures might they face? What values guide their decisions? How do they interpret the situation differently than you do? Review your summary, then compare it against your initial assumptions. Over time, this habit rewires neural pathways involved in theory of mind, strengthening your ability to anticipate others' needs and tailor your responses. Active recognition. Active recognition involves noticing and naming emotions both in others and in yourself as they arise. It builds on micro-expression, detection, and emotional awareness, guiding you to respond deliberately rather than react impulsively. When you actively recognize emotions, you validate experiences and prevent misunderstandings born of unspoken feelings. Imagine a manager, Lee, leading a quarterly review. As he presents performance data, he spots his team member, Nina, glancing repeatedly at her phone and diverting her eyes. Instead of brushing past, Lee pauses and says, "Nina, I noticed you seem distracted. Is there something on your mind you'd like to share?" This recognition invites Nina to articulate her concerns, perhaps an urgent family matter, rather than assuming she's disengaged or uninterested. Lee's active recognition fosters trust and allows him to adjust the meeting's pace or schedule a one-on-one follow-up. To sharpen active recognition, practice emotional labeling throughout your day. When someone speaks, internally note their tone and facial cues. They sound hesitant. Their smile looks forced. Then, if appropriate, name it aloud with empathy. It seems you're unsure about this step. This simple act signals attentiveness and respect. Pair this with self-recognition. When you feel frustration, label it. "I'm frustrated because..." and monitor how naming changes your response. Regularly journaling these moments deepens emotional granularity and equips you to navigate complex social landscapes. Self-compassion. Sustaining empathic engagement demands self-compassion, the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you offer others. Without it, empathic professionals risk burnout, compassion fatigue, and emotional depletion. Self-compassion replenishes empathy reservoirs, allowing you to stay present and supportive without sacrificing personal well-being. Self-compassion rests on 3 pillars: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-kindness means offering comfort to yourself in moments of perceived inadequacy rather than self-criticism. Common humanity reminds us that struggle is universal. You are not alone in facing challenges. Mindfulness involves holding your experiences in balanced awareness, neither suppressing nor exaggerating emotions. For instance, after an intense day of client support, I once retreated home, feeling drained by the weight of others' crises. My instinct was to push through or judge myself for feeling tired. Instead, I paused, acknowledged my fatigue. "I'm exhausted from caring deeply today," and offered self-kindness. It's okay to rest. I reminded myself that caring for others inevitably involves emotional labor shared by many in my field. Then I practiced a brief mindfulness meditation, observing sensations in my body without judgment. That self-compassionate reset not only restored my energy but also preserved the quality of my empathy for the next day's conversations. To cultivate self-compassion, incorporate short, reflective pauses into your routine. After a challenging interaction, take a minute to place your hand on your heart and breathe deeply, silently repeating a compassionate phrase like, "May I be kind to myself." Recognize that struggle-sclient crises, tough feedback, social missteps are part of the shared human experience, not personal failures. Over time, these micro-practices inoculate you against emotional burnout and strengthen your capacity to sustain empathic engagement. Integrating the 3 practices. Mastering empathic skills requires weaving perspective-taking, active recognition, and self-compassion into a coherent practice. Start each day with a brief intention setting. Today, I choose curiosity, attentiveness, and kindness, both to others and myself. During interactions, cycle through the steps. Notice emotional cues, imagine the other's viewpoint, and remain aware of your own emotional state. Afterward, debrief with self-compassion, acknowledging where you succeeded and where you can grow without judgment. One organization that has successfully integrated these practices is a global customer support center. They begin daily huddles with a mindful check-in, where agents briefly share how they feel entering the day. Supervisors model perspective-taking by inviting agents to describe recent challenging calls from the caller's perspective. After each session, they close with a self-compassion prompt. What's one thing you did well today? And how can you care for yourself this evening? This structured approach improved agent well-being metrics by 30% and increased customer satisfaction scores by 25% over 6 months, demonstrating that empathic proficiency benefits both individuals and organizations. Empathic skills flourish in environments that value continuous learning. Peer coaching circles, role-play workshops, and empathy labs where participants practice real-world scenarios reinforce these practices. In medical schools, simulated patient encounters teach students to balance clinical expertise with empathic engagement, using faculty feedback to refine perspective-taking and emotional attunement. Similar experiential learning in business, education, and community settings yields comparable gains in relational quality and performance. Practical exercises. 1. Perspective journal. Daily, write a short narrative from another person's viewpoint on a shared event. 2. Emotion radar. Set reminders every 3 hours to note dominant emotions you observed in others and yourself. 3. Compassion break. Schedule brief. Compassion breaks using a mantra. I am human. I deserve care during transitions between meetings. Regularly practicing these exercises builds neural pathways for empathy and resilience. You become not only more attuned to others' needs, but also more capable of sustaining that attunement without draining your own emotional reserves. Key insight: empathic skills rooted in perspective, taking, active recognition, and self-compassion are trainable practices that deepen connection, enhance understanding, and safeguard personal well-being. Next, we'll conclude with techniques for resolving interpersonal conflict, transforming disputes into opportunities for collaboration and growth. I arrived at the Community Mediation Center just as storm clouds gathered outside, mirroring the tension inside the room. 2 neighbors, Anna and Min, sat opposite each other at a small table, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Their dispute began over a fallen branch that cracked Min's car windshield, but it had mushroomed into weeks of silent treatments and passive-aggressive notes. As the mediator introduced the process, I watched their guarded posture and measured breaths. This was the crucible of conflict resolution, transforming entrenched opposition into cooperative problem-solving. I encouraged Anna to speak first, inviting her to share not just the incident, but how it affected her daily life. At first, her words came clipped. He never apologized, and I felt disrespected. When she paused, I reflected. You felt your neighbor disregarded how valuable your property is to you. Her shoulders unclenched slightly. Then Min spoke, voice tight but earnest. I was out of town and didn't know the branch fell. I felt judged without being heard. I mirrored his sentiment. You wanted the chance to explain before being blamed. This simple reflection began to soften their defenses, showing each that the mediator and, by extension, the other was listening for deeper meaning. Next, I asked each to identify underlying needs behind their positions. Anna admitted she worried about ongoing property damage and safety if branches fell again. Min confessed he felt micromanaged and embarrassed by what he perceived as public shaming. Recognizing needs rather than just positions shifted the tone from accusation to problem solving. I guided them. Anna, what would you need to feel secure? Min, what would help you feel respected? Anna suggested a mutually agreed tree inspection schedule. Min proposed sharing the cost of professional pruning. As they brainstormed, their posture relaxed, and the table between them seemed to shrink. Throughout the conversation, I paid attention to emotional cues: Anna's quivering voice when describing her stress, Min's quiet exhales signaling relief at being heard. When I sensed anxiety creeping back, I paused the discussion and suggested a brief break. During those minutes, I offered both a glass of water and a moment's respite. This intentional pause prevented escalation and modeled self-regulation in conflict. When we reconvened, the air felt noticeably lighter, and they proceeded with more empathy and openness. To ensure accountability, we drafted a simple agreement: a biannual tree maintenance plan, shared costs, and a commitment to address future concerns directly before they festered. I invited them to sign and photograph the document, reinforcing consistency bias. They publicly committed to cooperative behavior. Before leaving, I asked each to reflect on what surprised them about the other's perspective. Anna admitted she hadn't realized Min felt embarrassed. Min said he hadn't recognized how unsafe the falling branches made Anna feel. This moment of mutual insight crystallized the transformation from adversaries to collaborators. Conflict resolution hinges on 4 key steps: active listening, needs-based reframing, strategic pausing, and co-created agreements. Active listening, paraphrasing, and reflecting emotions builds trust and de-escalates defensiveness. Needs-based reframing shifts focus from entrenched positions to underlying concerns, opening pathways for creative solutions. Strategic pausing prevents emotional hijack and resets the conversation's tone. Co-created agreements leverage consistency to sustain collaboration beyond the session. Yet mastering these steps requires practice. In my early facilitation days, I coached a team that regularly clashed over credit allocation. Initial sessions stalled as members accused each other of sabotage. Applying the 4 steps transformed their dynamic. In one workshop, I asked each member to describe what recognition meant to them. One wanted public acknowledgement, another preferred a private email. We then co-designed a dual feedback ritual: public praise in meetings and private notes afterward. Over time, team cohesion improved and innovation soared. Cultural factors also influence conflict resolution. In high-context cultures, direct confrontation may feel disrespectful. Indirect methods, such as storytelling or third-party agents, work better. When mediating between a Vietnamese family and a Western landlord, I encouraged the family to share a traditional proverb about mutual care before discussing rent disputes. The landlord, struck by the poetic framing, responded with curiosity rather than defensiveness. We then transitioned into direct negotiation with newfound goodwill. Understanding cultural scripts and adapting mediation techniques ensures respect and effectiveness. Technology offers additional tools. Online mediation platforms allow disputing parties to submit confidential statements and propose solutions asynchronously. This can be valuable when in-person emotions run too high for face-to-face meetings. I once mediated a cross-border business conflict where time zones prevented live sessions. By collecting private video messages and shared whiteboard ideas, we maintained emotional nuance while creating a structured pathway to resolution. The final video call, informed by these asynchronous inputs, lasted half the usual time and ended in consensus. As you navigate conflicts, whether between colleagues, family members, or community groups, remember that disputes often mask deeper relational needs. Approach disagreements as opportunities to uncover and address these needs together. Use active listening to show you care. Reframe positions into needs to unlock creativity. Pause strategically to maintain composure, and co-create clear agreements that honor both parties. Key insight: effective conflict resolution transforms adversaries into collaborators by listening deeply, reframing disputes around shared needs, pausing to manage emotions, and crafting co-owned agreements that sustain cooperation. Now, having journeyed through the pillars of social intelligence from perception and empathy to communication, influence, and conflict resolution, we arrive at the culmination of this exploration. As we draw this series to a close, consider how every element of social intelligence interlocks to create a tapestry of genuine human connection. You began by tuning into unspoken signals, micro-expressions, gestures, and tone, awakening your innate capacity to perceive others' inner worlds. You delved into the neural choreography of empathy, discovering how mirror neurons and executive regions shape your social radar. You then navigated the balance between emotional resonance and cognitive perspective-taking, sharpening your ability to feel with others while thinking clearly. From there, you honed your verbal and nonverbal communication, learning to craft precise messages and embody authenticity through posture, tone, and strategic pauses. You harnessed the transformative power of empathy, deepening relationships by validating experiences and responding with genuine curiosity. You cultivated emotional regulation, mastering techniques to steer your inner weather rather than be swept away by it. You learned to interpret cultural nuances and mirroring, decoding the silent scripts that guide interactions across context. You rode group emotional currents, aligning with collective moods and guiding them toward shared aspirations. You embraced the art of difficult conversations, transforming potential minefields into collaborative dialogues grounded in psychological safety. You wielded influence ethically, leveraging reciprocity, social proof, authority, consistency, and scarcity to guide others toward meaningful action. You practiced empathy, drills perspective-taking, active recognition, and self-compassion, fortifying your relational muscles and safeguarding your well-being. Finally, you resolved conflicts by listening deeply, reframing around shared needs, pausing strategically, and crafting co-owned agreements that endure. This journey is not just theoretical. It is a call to integrate these practices into every interaction, professional, personal, or community-based. Start small. Notice a subtle gesture today. Name an emotion in a colleague, or pause consciously before responding. Experiment with framing your next feedback session positively, or weave a brief story into your next presentation. Practice a 3-minute mindfulness break between meetings to reset your regulatory circuits. Reflect on a recent conflict. Could you have paused or reframed differently? Each micro-adjustment compounds, strengthening your social intelligence muscle and expanding your capacity to connect, lead, and collaborate. Remember that at the heart of social intelligence lies choice. The choice to notice, to feel, to pause, to adapt, and to act with integrity. In choosing these moments, you transform ordinary exchanges into opportunities for trust, understanding, and shared purpose. You become someone who doesn't merely communicate but resonates, who doesn't just influence but inspires, who doesn't simply resolve conflict but cultivates collaboration. Where will you begin? Perhaps by inviting someone for a brief check-in and practicing active listening, or by rehearsing a difficult conversation with empathetic framing. Maybe by observing your own body language in the mirror before your next big meeting. Whatever your first step, take it with intention and curiosity. Return to this series whenever you seek a refresher on a specific pillar, Nuclei SIER for emotional regulation, or Nuclei SINDC for navigating tough talks. Your social intelligence is not a static trait, but a living practice, one that grows richer and more nuanced with each intentional exercise. As you apply these insights, you'll find conversations flow more smoothly, relationships deepen more quickly, and collective endeavors achieve new heights of harmony and effectiveness. Thank you for embarking on this exploration. May your strengthened social intelligence guide you to more authentic connections, transformative influence, and resilient collaborations wherever your next conversation takes you.